Hi guys, my name is Katerina and welcome to my channel. And on this channel we talk all about comics and I'm sharing everything I've learned after creating my own comic for more than 6 years. But we'll also talk about art, how to create art, how to enjoy creating art, and how to do art professionally and earn money with your art. If any of this is interesting to you, please feel free to engage with the buttons down below. It really helps the channel and channel in turn I hope can help you. In this video I wanted to talk to you about the fact that I don't know how my story ends, my own comic, and even sometimes I don't know where it's gonna go, and how I hope it's okay, and explain a little bit of my process, and also talk about how it wasn't always so and I used to exactly know how my story gonna go and how my process eventually changed, and how I transition, I guess, from person who plans the story forward to the person who just write as they go. So I decided to just talk a little bit about it, to share my thought processes about it. So I touched up on the fact that I'm a pantser and the fact that I don't like the word pantser quite a lot on this channel, but overall I don't like the word pantser. I guess discovery writer is more the term that I like because I don't like the word pants. I don't want to be called something that associated with pants. Maybe I fly by the seat of my dress. And I mentioned it already in several videos and kind of talked a lot about it, but I never addressed it head on and never talked about how it is that I'm doing that this way and how my process changed, where each changed, and what it was before and how I'm feeling about it right now, because I want to talk about my feelings today, guys. Also, if I'm wincing in this video a lot and I look like I'm in pain, don't worry, I am. It is because I have a migraine right now, and my migraines are very specific, very unique. Maybe I should do a whole video about my migraines, but basically I have migraine with aura. I was diagnosed years and years ago, but basically sometimes my aura is even worse than the migraine itself. It's not the pain that bothers me the most, it's auras that I have, is the side effects that happens with pain. It's all the weird stuff my brain does. For example, I can get blinded from one eye and temporarily lose vision in one eye or in both eyes, or have like a weird blind spot. Sometimes I'll lose sensation in my fingers. Sometimes I hear audio hallucinations. I know it sounds very strange, but yeah, sometimes I hear weird stuff, and I was told by my doctor that it's because of my migraine. Yeah, it's kind of weird, and I'm having it a little bit right now, and I'm not having much pain, but I'm having a little bit of aura creeping in. So if I'm wincing a little bit, it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's okay. We gotta be moving on. Small disclaimer here. But overall, I immediately want to say that I used to be a plotter and then I became a pantser, but I think my story goes is that I was a pantser, becoming a plotter, and then becoming a pantser again, because in my opinion, as I was growing up, not like a human growing up, but as a writer, as I was growing up as a writer, I realized that, well, I thought that being a pantser basically means that you don't know how to write, but when you're a plotter, when you actually plot things, it means you are a better writer. So I progressed from the being a pantser, and actually my first novel, the novel that is the base for volume 1 on my comic, volume 1 is not completed yet, so basically it's the first arc of the comic that I'm working on now. I wrote as a pantser. I actually wrote a chapter per week, and I wrote it pretty fast, and then I edited, but with the editor. But it was pretty fast process, and I was discovering the story as I was going, and I was trying to write volume 2, as I was trying to write book 2. I quickly realized that something was not going right, and I have several videos where I'm talking about why there was a problem with my book 2, but in short, I grew up. The story that I was writing for book 2 didn't match the story I wrote in book 1, and basically what I'm doing now with my comic is just rewriting the story the way I want it to be written, fixing book 1, fixing book 2. Anywho, I'm writing the ultimate story, the Book of Contradictions 2.0. But as I started writing book 2, I started plotting it out, and the problem is that I thought that I'm plotting it out because this is how good writing is supposed to be done. I didn't know that you can be either or and there is no strategy. I just always thought that you really have to know what's going to happen in your story, and for some reason every time I would hear authors that would say, hey, I don't know how my story is going to go, and discovering as I go, I thought something is really wrong with their process. It's really strange. I don't know how they're functioning, how they're able to finish stories. But because I had this perception, I plotted the whole story and immediately started to running into a lot of issues. Every chapter there would be an issue where I would go off script, off my own plan. And I didn't realize that this is a problem, and it took me years to realize that plotting is just not for me. I would plot the whole story, the whole, for example, book 2, and at this point we're talking writing part. When I was writing my comic as a novel, I would have a plot for a whole book 2, and then I would have overarching plot for up to book 3, and the end of of book 3 and like the end of the story, and I would have ideas of what chapter is going to be, and actually have the list of chapters ready, I would create each Word document for each chapter that I have, and each document already would have a name, so I knew the name of the chapters, all the chapters that I need to write. I would plan it all through. And the weird thing was, I mean, weird or obvious, is that every time I would go to the point when actually I was writing this chapter and I would struggle, it would have this weird feeling like I'm trying to force my story to be something it doesn't want to be. I was trying to write my story, but I obviously could physically write my story and write my characters to obey and behave with a plot, but it would be this feeling that this is wrong, it's not supposed to be like this, my character wouldn't say this. Like, I feel, I don't know if you writers out there have this feeling when you make your character do something that plot demands, and you know, you can do this, you can actually write and type it and make your character do this, but as you do this, your character becomes a stranger to you, because you're forcing your character to do something that is just not in their nature, and you just have this weird wall between you and your character now, because who is that person? Why would they do this? You don't understand, you just lose connection with your character. This is how you know it's not your character thing to do. So every time I would write a chapter, I would have this inner conflict, and every time I would kind of brain it out the way, so I would write the chapter differently than I originally intended. Different things might have happened in this chapter, but somehow I would hit some plot points. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes something would happen and I would completely derail this branch of the plot, like replot it, plot the chapters again, like I think through what will happen in the chapters again, and start writing again. And this was happen every chapter again and again and again. And I started thinking that maybe I'm having a writer's block or something like this. I started thinking about this big concepts. And there were some more factors that were happening while I was writing book 2 that I'm talking in videos that are going to be linking there, that would add on to the problems and why the writing was a little bit difficult. But the fact that I was doing the process that was natural to me was a very major factor. And again, I wouldn't connect the dots. I wouldn't think about like, hey Christina, why wouldn't you write the book 2 the same way you wrote the book 1? And my answer would be in my mind, well, because I wrote book 1 when I was worse of a writer, now I'm better of a writer, and now I'm doing the writing the right way. Also, I was under pressure that, you know, as I was writing first book, I was almost discovering the worlds and the characters for myself. But for part 2, the characters were already kind of established through whatever I discovered in book 1. So as I was writing book 2, I feel like I cannot just keep discovering my characters, that I cannot just keep learning more about them, that now I have this job of keeping them consistent with what I wrote prior, as if humans cannot grow and they just stay, and then, you know, you get to know a person through like spending a week with them in one story. So that's kind of what happened. And while I was writing book 2 of my novel, I wouldn't realize this. And then I started creating my comic. I eventually dropped the novel, I started the comic. I have a video talking about this process and how it happened. But in short, I still moved the same logic to my comic, the same idea of plotting and working with the plot. To be fair though, when I was creating first 2 chapters, it was very easy to do because I kind of literally just translated whatever I wrote for the novel to the comic version. If you look at my comic, first 2 chapters are pretty much identical to whatever they were in the novel, except the novel was actually set in Russia because I was living in Russia back then, and I thought that's my life and I would never know anything else. But then as I was creating the comic, I immediately moved to Canada because I've been in Canada by this time. I traveled there and then I came back to Russia, and I didn't want to do anything with Russia anymore, and especially my characters, I didn't want them to be anyway connected to Russia. And now that I was a little bit experienced with the Western world, I felt like I could change the setting. But yeah, that's the main difference. But overall, I just moved it over, so it was not a lot of plotting or writing or discovery writing going on, because I just translated the story. But now, as I'm writing my comic deeper and deeper into the story, it started deviating from the novel, which I'm totally fine with, because I'm writing this as a different person. I'm a different writer now. It's different things that I want from my story. I have obviously certain things that will be revealed throughout the story, or certain things that are the setup of the story, or how the story works, works. For example, one of my characters having certain flashbacks, and there's certain things that happened in the past prior to the story that conceptually I'm keeping, but I don't mind changing. But then, since I just grabbed my process and moved it to the comic, I would still continue plotting and plotting and plotting. And again, I have a huge document that is currently 78 pages long in the Pages app, where I just have all the chapters and I keep kind of like summary of what should happen in this chapter. And at this point, I have 9 versions of this document because I keep changing everything this happens. Because as I'm in the chapter right now, something would change that would obviously trigger a domino effect where you have to go and reassess what's going to be happening in the next chapters. And again, it happens again and again and again. And the more my comic deviates from my novel, the less material I have to work. Not like the less material I want to work in the comic. The more those situations start repeating, kind of like the same that I had when I was writing book 2. I would have a plan for this chapter, but as I would write the script for this chapter, I would struggle with the script even, and then I would start drawing, it just feels wrong. I would start drawing and I would have this feeling like I'm forcing the story to be something the story isn't, or I was telling the story not the right. It's almost the feeling that the story exists, the story is there, and as I'm writing it, it's almost I get like a green light or red light that says, you got it, no you didn't get it, no you didn't get it, oh you got this one, no this one is no, and it's almost like I'm tapping into, I don't know, some intuition and writing the story out. But again, I was in struggle a lot of the time and trying to tell myself, plotter, I plot stories, of course. So obviously I have to go with the plot. Why this chapter doesn't obey? Oh my goodness, like let's work it out and then, you know, plot next chapters. And now as I'm finishing chapter 8 and already drafted, like sketched out chapter 9, I can admit I'm clearly discovery writer, because I realized that the story is just better and the story is just becomes what it is. And my biggest fear in this sense was that I'm not sure, like how am I gonna get the plot points that are in the future if I don't know what's gonna happen in the future? How am I gonna do this setup? And that was the biggest fear that I had, and this the one that I'm finally letting go of, because it's almost like my process seems like I'm going with the flow and I'm writing each chapter as I am in this chapter. I know like overarching ideas, but they're really subject to change, and it's more thematically what is holding there. And sometimes I keep replotting, so characters that were villains become not villains, the characters that are good becoming bad characters, one character becomes 2 characters, they change the character. It's like it's constantly flipping. It's almost like the idea of my story is constantly changing, like flickering whatever is in the future. It keeps changing, and I only know which the right version of the story is as I'm writing the chapter right this moment, as I'm outlining it. And actually you can see in my drawing session podcast, I show you what I write, and there is episodes where I'm actually outlining chapter 9, like drawing lines. And this is where I'm finally embracing the fact that I'm a discovery writer and I'm drawing first before even writing. So I'm creating the story with my visuals first, and then I'm putting words on top after visuals already set up the story type of thing. So, and at this point I'm realizing, you know what, I probably should not stress out of how my story is gonna end, which plot line is gonna go where. And obviously keep stressing out, because in every other aspect of life I'm pretty much a planner. I'm a Capricorn, I like stuff structured, I like stuff organized, I have big goals and I go to my big goals. I need to know what's gonna happen for in the future. I am that person in every other aspect. In the fact that I seem to be a discovery writer challenges my worldview in every aspect, and it's changing my whole being, and it's actually very interesting and I'm kind of enjoying it. But I feel like at this point I'm letting go of this fear of not knowing how my story ends or not knowing where my story is gonna go. I decided that at this point, rather than committing to the ending of the story or committing to the certain plot lines that I thought, okay, that's good that this happens and that this happens and I have this map, rather than committing to this, I'm committed to being true to my story in the moment as I'm writing it, because I feel like I'm the most connected to my story when I am writing it right now, as I'm creating a line for a current panel, as I'm finishing the lines for the current page, and not as I'm drawing through, but when I'm creating a lines and composition. This is where I feel my story gets built, and I don't know, I'm admitting I don't know how my story is going to be built in the future. I need to be this close to the story to know. Everything I can do is guesstimate, and that's, I just think it's not ideal. real, and it keeps changing and keeps changing, and some characters only reveal themselves to me as I'm putting my focus on those characters and as I'm starting writing a new chapter with their POV. And let's see how it goes. So far things seem to be working out, and what helps me, one of the advice that I made a whole video about, is just keep going back and rereading everything that I wrote before and just understanding the story that I'm writing. I'm reading everything and I'm understanding where the story is going. Certain things that I put there almost by accident that didn't seem to be important, as I read I realized that they are important, and this is the storylines that I need to pick up in the next chapter as I write, or I just refresh them and then just intuitively weave them in as I'm writing the next chapter. So this is kind of my journey with the situation right now. I'm trying completely embrace that I'm a discovery writer, and honestly, writing a comic this one is mine. It will take me years and couple, maybe 3 decades to finish my comic. I will be the different person by the time I will be finishing it, and honestly I feel it is a little odd for me to know how my story is gonna end when by the time I will be ending the story I will be a way more mature woman, and maybe what I want to say with my story would change, and I need to allow the story to change with me, and I cannot plot for that. So yeah, that's it for today's video. This is kind of something that I wanted to discuss and pop in and talk about fencing, I guess, a little bit. Let me know in the comments down below which type of a writer you are. I really want to talk about and discuss, and because every process is fantastic, and I feel also there is like a spectrum. It's not either or, it's a huge spectrum how you do it, and everybody has their beautiful process. And let me know about yours. And yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.